Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Asher Marketing Podcast. I'm Anthony Giuliano, and our guest tonight is a Sagamore of the Wabash recipient, an AdFed Silver Award Medal winner, and a Journal-Gazette Fort Wayne Citizen of the Year, Larry Wardlaw. Larry, how you doing?
I'm fine, Anthony. How are you?
I'm good. That's a lot of accolades. Did I miss any?
Oh, I'm sure there's a couple things there that maybe we missed, but nothing really.
I think you are our most highly decorated guest.
Well, I thank you for that compliment. I appreciate it.
Well, and now you're here with me, so
no, this is a pleasure. I'm delighted.
This is your trip back down to earth from the stratosphere. So what's going on? How are things? You've been vaccinated.
I have. I'm at the appropriate age long ago that I was qualified early on, so I got both of my vaccinations, and I feel relatively safer. I think most people are.
Yeah.
And it certainly put in a word, the state has dropped just now to 45.
45, yeah.
And so I would encourage everyone, including youngsters like yourself, to do that because it's,
I was official even before it dropped to 45.
Were you really?
And I have mine scheduled for April Fool's Day, which is appropriate.
Appropriate.
For me,
Very appropriate.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us.
Sure.
As we were discussing before we hit record, we ask a few questions on this podcast about your career path, about the company you work for, and about some of the stuff you're working on as we speak. We can go in whatever direction you would like, however. These often go to healthy digressions, sometimes unhealthy digressions, but I want to make good use of your time since you came all the way from across the hall to do this podcast.
Did.
Yes. Well, if you haven't guessed already, Larry is a longtime Asher employee, so we'll talk a little bit about Asher Agency. But before we do that, I want to hear, how did you get to Asher? What were you doing? I know you grew up in Fort Wayne.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about that and where you went from there and how long you've been here and what that's been like.
Sure. Well, I grew up in Fort Wayne, as you said. I had a sibling, a twin sister, as a matter of fact. She and I grew up here together. And I went from there, well, not right from birth, but I went through school, of course. I was going
to say, you're pretty advanced.
I'm very advanced.
Yeah.
It was a Concordia Lutheran High School.
Which used to be where Indiana Tech is now?
It is indeed.
Yeah.
It was part of the Indiana Tech. Matter of fact, the major campus was the Concordia College.
Okay. All right.
In years before. And then there's a corner building on the diagonal. Mm-hmm. That faces...
is that the Cunningham Business Center?
It's the Cunningham Business Center. Sits on that corner diagonally. And that was our high school.
Okay.
For Concordia until they moved to the new location. I did move with the new location.
Okay.
Back in 64-ish or something.
Okay.
So
all right.
Anyway. But I chose to stay here in Fort Wayne and went to IPFW. Now known as Purdue Fort Wayne, of course. Mm-hmm. And it was, as I look back on it now, it was really a great choice because I was not sure what kind of work I wanted to do or what my major might be. So I started out in education.
Okay.
And ultimately ended up with a degree in education.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Well, speech and theater education. I should qualify that because I really wanted to be a theater person.
And you were involved in theater in high school?
A little bit, but more so in college.
All right.
At the again Purdue Indiana Theater. The Purdue Theater had a fairly good reputation for an academic theater. And as a matter of fact, I still stay in touch. We have a email group from those days that I stay in touch with, people from around the country who've done various theater things and stuff. But at any rate, I found that I think sometimes you regret not taking that journey out of town.
Sure.
Because that made essentially my entire career in life has been in Fort Wayne. And at that stage, I thought, my friends were going off to New York and to other places to try to work in the business. And driving cabs and waiting on tables.
Yeah.
And then they found out they could drive cabs and wait on tables back in Fort Wayne, too.
Yeah, for sure.
But I was very fortunate because out of that, right out of college, I did get a couple of part-time jobs. I was the youth theater director for the then known as Civic Youth Theater. Now it's just the Youth Theater, and the business manager for the Arena Dinner Theater.
Okay, all right.
And that's how I sort of started out after college and pursuing my theater interest. But candidly, I found out that that's not exactly the most lucrative field.
Sure.
And I was doing 2 part-time theater jobs just to scratch out a living.
Sure.
And then I had this really rare opportunity, a wonderful Fort Wayne legend herself, LaDonna Huntley. And some of our older listeners might recognize that name, but LaDonna was a very community-involved person and invited me or asked me to interview for a job in the mayor's office. And the mayor then was Bob Armstrong.
Okay.
And there was an opening in the marketing public relations department, and LaDonna sought me for that and selected me. And so I ended up working in the mayor's office for a couple of years before we were defeated.
Sure.
He ran against Win Moses, and Win Moses lost.
And you were politely shown the door.
And I was shown the door politely by letter.
As what happens in political.
Happens in politics.
Circles,
but it was a wonderful education. It was a wonderful experience. And I really strengthened my public relations skills by being in that office for those years. And immediately went to the Chamber of Commerce. And the Chamber offered me a very similar job as the Director of Marketing and Communications and Membership. And I did that for 5 years.
Okay.
And really enjoyed it. But this guy named Tim Borney, whom you well remember, was the founder of Asher Agency, came knocking on my door.
Now, did you know Tim?
I did know Tim,
okay.
And he knew me because we had while I was working at the Chamber, Asher Agency was representing the Grand Wayne Center.
Okay.
And the Grand Wayne Center was not built yet. It was under construction.
Okay. So we've worked with the Grand Wayne pretty much since its
We really have.
Wow, okay, I didn't realize that.
1985 when the Grand Wayne opened, but obviously they worked with him the year or two prior to that.
Sure.
And I was asked as a volunteer from the Chamber to help work on the opening opportunities or activities, and that's where Tim and I sort of met indirectly.
Okay.
And then when he had an opening here at Asher, and there were only 5 employees then.
Okay.
And when the 5 left.
Was that when you were hired? They all left?
I was hired.
Yeah. They heard Larry's coming on board and
coming,
they said,
so
see you
that
later.
Was it.
Yeah.
I'm out of here. But I was fortunate enough to get an account executive job with Asher, and thanks to Tim. And, of course, Tim is no longer with us, but I will credit Tim for certainly giving me that opportunity because I really was reticent to do that.
Yeah.
It's fun to think about Tim because obviously you knew him and had your own personal relationship with him as well as I did. But he would sneak into my office at the Chamber and put postums in places like, get out of this dump before it's too late. And he would leave me all these terrible notes. And wisely, probably about 6 months or 8 months after I accepted the job, the director at the Chamber of Commerce left.
Okay.
And which meant everything was in turmoil and office changes and people change.
Yeah.
So really, he's gave me a unique opportunity.
Yeah. So you've been at Asher how many years
35 years this summer.
Okay. All right. So what have been some of the biggest changes? Obviously, Tim was the founder. Tim was a presence here, and Tim's no longer with us, and we miss Tim. That's a big change even in my relatively short period here at Asher. But what have been some of the biggest changes from your perspective?
Well, I think just the entire industry, of course, that's true for anyone who works in any industry, has changed dramatically in, a 35-year span.
Sure.
Our business, the concept around our business is still the most important thing is the client. So, I mean, that everything we do still evolves around the value of a client and what we can do with them and for them.
Yeah.
But it's amazing the changes, because technology was the change. I'll never forget, we used to go to the Chamber building, which is a few blocks away, because when we needed to fax something, because Tim said, we're not investing in a fax machine. Why would we need a fax machine?
Yeah.
So we didn't want to pay for that. So
Sure.
we would run across the street and fax something.
That sounds like Tim.
That's
and maybe
very
he
much.
was just ahead of his time, because now we don't really need fax machines.
See, that's right. He just didn't know how ahead of himself he was. But technology really, as you well know, because you're really a very technical person and very skilled in that arena, just has gradually changed our business, and then sort of dramatically the last probably 10 years is just a really big change.
Yeah.
Kids laugh when I talk about the creative department, because we were so small, we kind of all worked together.
Yeah.
But we used to have to drive over to the typesetters
Yeah.
and get type and bring it back to the artist, who would cut it out with an X-Acto knife and paste in the type.
Yeah.
Much like the days of Gutenberg with the printing press.
Yeah. Probably in technology standpoint, closer to Gutenberg than where we
Closer
are
to
today.
Gutenberg than we are today. It's just phenomenal to think that we had to actually paste type down.
Well, I just was talking to someone the other day that, the internet was a post-college phenomenon for me, and the first computer I had at work was not a graphical interface. You would have something on the screen and you would print it and hope that it turned out like you wanted it to turn out. So we are both showing our age for sure.
Well,
but
indeed.
Yeah. So in terms of, I want to talk about a different facet of your career, because I know it's important to you. You've been obviously named Fort Wayne Citizen of the Year. That means you've been involved as a volunteer. You've been involved in civic endeavors. You've been involved in theater. How did you get involved in all that stuff, and why have you stayed involved over the years? Why is that important to you?
Well, it's sort of instinctively important for me to sort of be involved in the community, because, again, having lived and grown up here all of my life, there's a value in working in community activities, and it's a little selfishly, it's a value that it fulfills me in lots of ways. Hopefully that some of the things that I've done have helped others in the organizations that I've been involved with.
Yeah.
But candidly, it does give you a great deal of satisfaction and value and opportunities to do things. And one of the cultures that I've always felt ever since really being at the Chamber and even the mayor's office was that your responsibility is to be involved in the community in some activities.
Yeah.
And I was encouraged to do that. And here at Asher, there's a culture that encourages us to be involved in community, be that whatever it is. That brings some depth to the agency as well.
Yeah. A lot of our people are involved in a number of different ways.
They are
and
indeed.
It's interesting to see where people's passions lie. Throughout the years, we've had people involved in, in issues related to animals, issues related to kids. So interesting, different facet of what's important to people. So when people ask you to describe Asher, and be as candid as you want.
All right.
What do you say when people are like, what's this place Asher like, and how has that changed over the years, if at all?
Well, one of the consistencies at Asher for me over the years is the synergy of the staff, the ability for the staff to not be so siloed that somebody does the creative, somebody does media, somebody does public relations, and maybe we don't. In some agencies or some organizations, that doesn't connect.
Yeah.
And we're not that way. I mean, Asher is very much a collaborative kind of experience. And that's what I really like about it, is because you're not always, as you know, account service isn't always welcome in the creative department. But at least...
Well, it depends on which one of us walks in. You're probably a lot more welcome than I am.
I don't know that for a fact. But because you do, as an account person, represent ultimately the client, that your voice needs to be there too. But that's what I find about our departments. They're very receptive to what you have to bring to the table for and about the client.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, I've always said that you're the voice of the client to the agency and the voice of the agency to the client. And that can be a delicate balancing act. I remember I don't know if you remember this, but before I came to Asher, I reached out to you and I said, okay, tell me the real story. And you said, there's two things you need to know. Occasionally, Tim will drive you nuts, and the creative folks can be a little sensitive. And those two things have stuck with me over the years.
And those have been consistent
Absolutely.
over the years until Tim passed. But yeah, I mean, there's always that interesting mix. One of your previous guests and a good friend of yours and a client of ours, Brian Englehart, who did work for us at one point. And I know he's done a podcast with you. But he called me prior to coming to Asher too and asked, what's this place like? And I gave him similar comments, but he still came and he came to work for us. And I was delighted he did. And of course now he's at Indiana Tech in that role. So
So you're kind of like the godfather. Before people started Asher, they call you and
check it out.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I'd also like to talk about, the how do you balance all this stuff? Because over the years, there's times when you've been involved in multiple nonprofit organizations as a volunteer. You're working at Asher. You're doing theater stuff. How do you make all that work together?
Well, not unlike you. I mean, you're a busy guy and you're in lots of things and involved in things as well. So you just make time in your schedule for that. But again, those community involvements that I have really sort of filled for me some life experiences that, I'm single. And it puts me in a position where I, sometimes have more time to do evening meals or meals. I do evening meals too often.
Sometimes I eat. Sometimes I have time.
Sometimes do that. But weekend things, and I have a more open schedule, and you just make time. And of course, some of those things, working at civic theater or youth theater over the years on the board, it's a passion. I've liked it. Yeah. But then other boards have provided me opportunities that it's always good to say yes to a board that maybe you have no real connection with necessarily or an awareness of, and you learn so much about the community. I've served on the, as you may know, the Metro Human Relations Commission.
Yeah.
And many mayors ago, I was appointed to that commission by Mayor Graham Richard, which goes way back. Yeah. And I'm still serving on that commission today. Yeah. But it brought a real depth of understanding about our community and an important part of our community, because Metro's role is to obviously protect individuals or assist individuals where there's discrimination in housing or in employment. And it opened my eyes to a lot of things that I didn't realize might have been going on in the community. Yeah. And in a small way, maybe helping make that better.
Yeah. So how many years with Metro altogether?
We calculated this, I think, the other day. It looks like it's about 14.
Okay. All right.
And I was just reappointed this year by our current mayor, Tom Henry.
So. All right. Well, and one of the things that I believe to be true is that serving on a nonprofit board is an exercise in learning what you don't know about that organization. When I started with Trails, I thought I knew quite a bit about Trails, and I figured out I knew about 1% of what I needed to know, and still don't know as much as I would like to, but you learn as you go. So
you do, and I think that's an excellent example, because you do learn from that. Again, it's that exchange. Hopefully you're providing some value to that organization, but again, you're getting value back from that organization.
For sure. So, one of the things I typically ask our guests is to talk about what they're working on, and I'd like to hear a little bit about that. But I'd also like to hear, this is a big question, what are some of the most meaningful things you've been involved in? If you could pick, 3 things over the course of your career, it could be a project at Asher, it could be something in the community, it could be a theater project. So you can tell us if you want, what are you working on now that's meaningful to you? Or you can skip that and go to, the bigger question, whatever you want.
Well, that's a complicated question.
That's as you can tell, I'm still learning how to do this.
Well, you're doing it very well. My compliments.
Well, thank you.
No, it's over the course of my career. It's almost hard to select something specifically. I think some of the major things. Well, of course, as I mentioned, Metro has just been kind of a real important part for me.
Yeah.
But again, that's a volunteer opportunity.
Yeah, sure.
But I think we've worked the Fort Wayne International Airport is an example of a client that I've worked on for many years, and now as time, I'm really moved into a part-time role here at Asher, and there's a wonderful Katie Mahurin, who is a wonderful AE here and is working on the account. We're kind of working on it together. But
she's one of the people who, when she walks in the creative department, they smile and they're glad to talk to her. Unlike
I
you
think
and me.
so.
Yeah,
unlike
so.
us.
Yes,
of course. I can't imagine why that would be. I know why it is, but we won't say. But the airport has been you can talk about, people say, well, the airport's just the airport, but there's been a real evolution in our airport, and I think in the leadership and what's happened there, it's been pretty unique. That we as a community this size still have a regional airport that really connects us with anywhere in the world.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the things that it's really interesting to me, and this has been an evolution over the time I've been here, because I moved here in 94, and there was a time when there wasn't much going on in Fort Wayne. And at that time, I really moved to Fort Wayne after my son was born. So I've been in Northeast Indiana for that entire time, but moved here after my son was born. So it's been about 21 years. And to see how Fort Wayne has changed. I mean, when I first moved here, it was a nice mid-sized city, but it's completely different today. And it's really interesting coming from a big city, how well the airport shows up, that people come in, they're like, wait a minute, somebody gave me a cookie on the way out.
I know.
And they picked me up in a, little pedicab, not a pedicab, but a little, car to take me because it was raining. Not the experience you have at my former home airport, Logan Airport. And I've always said I love that I can get from my home to the airport and through security in about 20 minutes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the convenience factor, it's the comfort factor, it's the safety factor, it's all of those kinds of things. Yes.
Yeah.
I've been in Logan, and quite frankly, you have to protect your cookie. It's not an easy airport.
Yeah.
So it's they're playing off of that opportunity of comfort and safety and convenience, as you point out, is really important.
Yeah, and it's really great when you come home that you're 10 minutes from home instead of a couple hours. Yeah. So what else? What other projects stand out to you either now or over the years? They were doing a retrospective, apparently.
A retrospective. I'm trying to think. It is difficult because there's so many things that we were involved in. Over the years.
Yeah. And you've met a lot of really great people. I've seen your wall of fame. Who are some of the most interesting people you've had the chance to meet over the years?
Well, thanks again to the agency business. I think we, as on the public relations side of our business, which is where I spend a good deal of my time here too, we would book particular celebrities in for events for clients. And we would be hired to work with the client specifically for that. Shirley Jones was one of our favorites.
And Shirley Jones was Partridge Family, correct?
Well, to you youngsters, yes, but to some of us oldsters.
I thought that was going to be too old for most people as a reference.
Shirley Jones, who's still with us, was a great Broadway star.
Okay.
Music Man and shows like that. So she had a wonderful Broadway career.
Sure.
And we were representing Comcast, the cable company, and they added AMC to their lineup, and she was the spokesperson for them. So we brought her in, and we had a nice evening and showed a film at the embassy, and I had the opportunity to sort of MC that and spend some time with her, and that was fun. But we brought Captain Kangaroo in.
All right.
And the captain... It was either Bob Keeshan, which was his real name, or he was captain, but he would not do both. If he were dressed as Bob Keeshan, which he is, he really did not want people to think of him as the captain.
Okay,
and it's very hard not to just, when I would see him, to say, it's Captain Kangaroo, with blue, Mr. Green Jeans and Bunny Rabbit. And but he was an interesting guest, as was Art Linkletter. I have a great friend, I say a friend. I mean, he is really a friend because we went to college together. Well, part of college together. He's younger than I am, but I directed him in those early years. Dan Butler, and Dan was Bulldog on Frasier. Most people remember that particular role.
Yeah,
and he's since gone on to do a lot of good work on Broadway and in theater, and very successful. So
now, did you meet Janet Leigh? Because the one of the things that Larry Wardlaw is known for is that he has an autographed shower curtain from Janet Leigh, who of course was in Psycho.
Well, Janet Leigh is. You're right. I never met her.
Okay.
I bought her shower curtain at an auction for the Cinema Center. Because
not a sentence that you hear very often.
No, it isn't.
Yeah.
And nobody was bidding on it, so I raised my hand, and suddenly I spent $150 for a shower curtain with Janet Leigh's signature on it.
Yeah.
But it motivated me to convert an entire bathroom in my house to Janet Leigh. So, and I have autographed photos from her and other kinds of things, memorabilia. Yeah. Again, unfortunately, I never had the opportunity to meet her.
Okay. All right. Well, I never knew that story, so that's. And anyone else who comes to mind as someone you've met that was memorable for maybe good reasons or not so good reasons?
Well, there were just such interesting people because of your involvement with other organizations. There was, I don't know whether you remember a person named Carl Perkins.
Yeah.
And he was the Animal Kingdom person.
Yeah.
Well, I'd never met him, but I met his lovely wife, who was a spokesperson for the American Cancer Society. So, you never know where you're going to meet someone who's interesting and fun and fun to know. So, but those are some of the selected folks off of that ego wall at home.
Yeah. Well, and my only experience that's anything like that, my experience is mostly very boring, but I did help Roy Firestone put on his bow tie before an event one time. So that's my claim.
Well, that's something.
And 99% of the people listening to this are saying, who's Roy Firestone and what's a bow tie? But in any case, all right. So I want to switch to the sort of short answer part of the show. If you've had a long and successful, we joke around, but you've had a very successful career. You've done a lot of things that people would love to do. What's your best piece of career advice? If there was someone here, just starting at Asher, or someone who starting out in the community, was new to the community and kind of just getting started, what would you say to them about having a successful career, being fulfilled in your career, all that stuff? What do you think the key to that is?
The key, the immediate reaction I have to that, Anthony, would be that don't hesitate to do whatever it is that somebody suggests that you do.
Okay.
I think that
within reason.
Within reason, of course.
Yeah.
But I think there are people who have a vision of what they might like to do or want to do or have a career path that they want, and avoid opportunities where it may not be obviously your career path. And I think you can well understand that in your own personal career. But you start out in a path, as I said, I wanted to be a theater person. And it turns out that after all of these years, I've really probably done more of a theatrical experience than even some of my friends who graduated and went on and were directing theater or acting around the country. Because theater, for me, was, being an account person is you're presenting and at a pitch or a meeting, you're performing.
Yeah.
So just don't ever turn down an opportunity to try something that you've never done.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and there's so much pressure put on people to figure it out early. I know a lot of people who, obviously they don't broadcast this, but who are kind of miserable in their career because they decided what they were going to be at 21 and have stuck with it even if they didn't like it. So, I think it's important. I do believe it's bad advice to say, follow your passion and you'll never work a day in your life. That's just not true. Follow your passion and you'll work every day in your life. But there is something to be said for getting fulfillment from the type of work you're doing more than a paycheck or prestige or some of those things that I've never enjoyed.
I appreciate that. Me too.
Yeah.
But no, I think that's really a good, very, very valid point.
So typically I ask people to give a quick description of the organization they work for, but instead I'm going to ask you, why have you stayed at Asher so long?
I go back to a comment I made earlier about the culture. I think the culture of Asher and the freedom of being at Asher and the opportunities. The culture is obviously encouraging us to work and do other things so we get experiences. Yep. So I've never always checked it out, but when I had the opportunity to be on a board or whatever in the community, I would, is this okay?
Yeah.
And there was always a support for that here.
Yeah.
It was like, be on the Civic Theater Board, be on the American Cancer Society board or whatever it is. Again, that's really valuable that we encourage that kind of culture.
Yeah, and I think that's been a through line, certainly in the time that I've been here. We joke about Tim and his quirks, but he was really someone who had a heart for service and encouraged people to do that. His brother Tom did it and modeled it, like Tim, with some of the things he did. And Absolutely. Now that's passed down to Kara, where she's involved in organizations and really encourages people to be involved, obviously to make new connections, but also to kind of make sure that we have that outlet for our passions, understanding people are not one-dimensional, and the more you do, the more fulfilled you'll be in what you do most of the time, which is your work.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. I have one more question for you. So I mentioned at the outset all these accolades you've received. What's been most meaningful for you? Was it one of those, times when you were recognized, or was it something else that stands out, and why?
Well, I probably have to say the Citizen of the Year was probably one of the most significant things for me, and it was very humbling to receive that, and the awareness of that, because, it is the Journal-Gazette, our now only paper in Fort Wayne, awards that every year to someone or someone's. And that was just, I was stunned, and I was humbled and flattered to have been asked, and that probably was just kind of a neat highlight, because I have such a respect for then Craig Klugman, who was the publisher, or editor, of the paper, and Julie Inskeep, who's the publisher, was, and it was to be recognized in that capacity, and that was really neat. Yeah,
and how was that? What was the process to select that? Was it the editorial board?
It's the editorial board of the paper each year makes that selection or submits names or collects names and submits names. And again, I was quite shocked when I received that call.
Yeah.
And
so you had no idea that was coming?
Not at all.
Huh.
I mean, before it was printed, I knew.
Yeah.
Because they took a photograph.
Yeah. You didn't want just to have a photographer show up at your house.
Just show up there and what's going on. So,
yeah.
But yeah, it was quite a surprise.
Yeah. And obviously, I asked you to pick the most meaningful one. But what about the Sagamore of the Wabash? Because that, for those who don't know, that is the highest honor given an Indiana citizen by the governor. Was that something you were surprised?
Now, that was a total surprise.
Yeah.
Total surprise, because there was a
gathering.
You
thought you were just going to Henry's.
I was going to Henry's, or was at Henry's. I think, as I recall, you were there.
Yes.
And a staff and some of my closer friends were invited, and I showed up at a late afternoon at Henry's for what I thought was a staff get-together. Yeah. And then this award was presented. And you're right. I mean, it is and again, I'm humbled by that, because there are a number of great people and wonderful people in the state that I know who've received that award, and I'm glad to, again, happy to be included in that list of Sagamores.
Yeah. Speaking of Henry's, we had talked at one point about having a couple drinks while we were doing that, and we missed that opportunity.
We should have.
But in some respects, it probably would have gone on for like 4 hours.
It could have. Yeah. Had we been serving beverages here, that would have been a problem.
It would have been fun for you and me, but we would have lost all 4 of our listeners during that process. All right, so what else do you want people to know? What else is on your mind? Anything?
Not really, other than I would encourage everyone to, I'm 72, be 73 this summer, and I'm still working. And I think I would encourage everyone to not put a time frame on work as if, this magic number of 65 happened, I think, in the Roosevelt days when Social Security was done, and they knew everybody was going to die when they were 65, so they weren't going to have to pay them anyway. But I think continuing to be involved in work and community service is probably the most important thing to keep you active and healthy.
Yeah, and stay engaged. And the good thing I think that I see reflected in you is you can kind of pick your spots when you get older and say, I want to work, but not necessarily 60 hours a week.
Exactly.
And yes, I want to work, but here's where I think I can add the most value. And certainly I think one of the great things about your tenure at Asher and certainly your position now is being a mentor to some of our younger people and helping them understand changes in the industry and give them a perspective. And sometimes it's just on a bad day, helping them understand that very little is terminal other than death. And if a client's mad at you, you just got to muddle through and you'll be fine in a couple of days down the road.
That's very, very true.
Yeah.
I mean, that's absolutely the case.
Yeah.
And I do enjoy it like you do. I enjoy having the opportunity to mentor, maybe it's a strong word, but I mean to encourage or support younger members of our staff.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I appreciate the role you've played in my development over the years, because had I not had that conversation back in 1994, I think it was, 2004, I might never have come here, and it's been a great experience. So thanks for that.
I can speak for Asher maybe, but as a almost retired person, part-time, I'm really glad you said yes and came to Asher.
Well, me too. Well, Larry, this has been, as it usually is when we sit across a table from each other at a safe social distance, this has been a pleasure. Thank you for sharing your story with us, and I'm glad that we've had the opportunity to work together.
Well, thank you.
And thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll be back next week with another great guest, and we hope you'll join us then.